This year, we are celebrating the 125th anniversary of Mankato State University's founding, and in the spirit of the woman who first led that school in the late 1860s, I welcome you to the university campus. This conference reflects Mankato State's commitment to diversity and to women, and over the years has extended our learning in significant ways. Do we want to stop and put this together? This conference is an annual ritual in my life, and I know it is for many of you. The reunions that we have here with each other give us healing and connection and courage to carry on for the year in the future. I'm curious as to how many of you have been here before, so if you have come to this conference at least once previously, would you at this time please raise a hand, and then would all of you look around to see how impressive those hands are? A hand for the hands. I'm also curious about how many of us are new this year to this event. So if you are attending this conference for the very first time, would you please raise a hand? And I want all of you to look around and see how impressive those hands are. Impressive audience, impressive program. I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank the program co-sponsors, Women's Studies, Cultural Diversity, and the university programs for arranging this program so magnificently before us. As a former English teacher, I'm particularly taken with the conference theme, The Power of Words, and honoring of Meridel Lesueur. In the afterword to her novel, The Girl, written in 1939 and published 40 years later, Meridel Lesueur wrote, "This memorial to the great and heroic women of the Depression was really written by them. As part of our desperate struggle to be alive and human, we pooled our memories, experiences, and in the midst of disaster, told each other our stories or wrote them down. We had a writers group of women in the Workers' Alliance, and we met every night to raise our miserable circumstances to the level of sagas, poetry, and crowds. There was no tape recorder then, so I took their stories down. Some could not write very well, and some wrote them out painfully in longhand while trying to keep warm in bus stations or waiting for food orders at relief offices. They looked upon me as a woman who wrote, like the old letter writers, and who strangely and wonderfully insisted that their lives were not defeated, trashed, defenseless, but that we as women contained the real and only seed and were the granary of the people. This should be the function of the so-called writer, to mirror back the beauty of the people, to urge and nourish their vital expression and their social vision." Today, we are fortunate to have as our three keynote speakers three women who will mirror back the beauty of the people to urge and nourish their vital expression and their social vision. Their biographies appear printed in your conference program. Neala Schleuning from Mankato writes on the world of work and women, and her first published book was on Meridel Lesueur. CarolAnn Russell from Bemidji is the author of a book of poems, a chapbook called The Tao of Women, and directed the Headwater Writers Conference. Rachel Tilsen from Twin Cities works for Indian treaty rights, peace, freedom, and is president of the Meridel Lesueur Library Foundation, which honors her mother, Meridel Lesueur, who will also speak to us today. The speakers will appear in that order, each passing to the next, talking to us as I pass it now to Neala in the spirit of that woman who first led Mankato State.
button, Women Against Military Madness. A good friend of mine and yours, Susan Deason, says that membership in WAM is dropping off because people think the war is over. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not, so you better send in your memberships. The military-industrial complex is alive and well. This spot announcement on behalf of Women Against Military Madness should be taken very seriously, and it will be the only advertisement in my speech this afternoon. The topic of my talk is Fierce for Change, the Radical Spirituality of Meridel Lesueur. In one of her finest poems, Meridel wrote, "Send out a crier," she says, "I want to talk to the people." I want to talk to you today about Meridel and about her spirituality. I want to talk to you today about the need for this radical spirituality in our personal lives, in our society, in the world. It is a very demanding spirituality. It demands that we transform our view of the world. It demands that we take up the burdens of our brothers and sisters. It demands that we resonate to the earth. It also demands that we reject what Meridel calls the male world, the world of ownership and exploitation, the world of rape and abuse, the world of capitalism. Like all the great religions of the world, Meridel explores the meaning of spirit through the actions of our living our lives with one another. All the world's great religions address several major themes: the need to become anti-materialistic and to overcome capitalism, the power of solidarity with others, a commitment to a philosophy of becoming, to refuse to participate in power over others, and finally to empower the powerless. These are the themes that I'd like to explore with you this afternoon. One of Meridel's best-known short stories is entitled Annunciation. It is a rare piece of literature, a pregnant woman's reflection of her impending birth, the impending birth of a child. It is at once intensely personal and intimate, at once passionately social. It is a story of birth and emergence into the people, a story of great personal and spiritual transformation. Annunciation means, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, the act of announcing, of proclaiming, or declaring publicly or officially. It is the bringing of news. It is a political action, the voice of one bearing visions and insights to others. In Meridel's life and work, Annunciation stands at the turning point of her own life in 1928. It is her declaration of life, of being, of woman and politics and commitment, of self and collective, and Meridel seeks, through her spirituality, to breathe into life, to inspire, meaning to breathe in, to move us to personal and social transformation. There are several important concepts in Meridel's philosophy that I'd like to explore. Two that are most central to her spirituality are the idea of connection and the idea of emergence. They are not separate ideas, but complementary to one another, as we shall see. A third concept is the necessity for transformation and for change. Meridel speaks to us about connection through all her work. It is both a spiritual and a political concept. It is an integrative power, not exploitive power or power over. It is power from within, from inside and between. First of all, according to Meridel, to be connected requires a whole change of perspective. We must reject the world of science, the belief in objectivity. The world of analysis is dead, she once wrote, and we must give up the essence of objectivity, what she calls the fetish of being outside. She writes, "There is no relationship possible if you are outside. The relationship is like a lodge, all within the cult. You cannot touch a man or a woman that is done up, insulated. There is no spark. You must pay tribute to each other. Otherwise, there is a lurking hatred. I think the only way to be whole, she writes, is to understand that you belong to society, you belong to women, you belong to children. I think wholeness is related to how much you are integrated in relationships. It all comes down to the relationship of everything. She uses the image of the circle, the concept of the circular consciousness, to describe this spirituality of connectedness. What binds her dynamic universe together is the idea of praxis, of relationship. We are all in the circle. Nothing is external to the reality. Relationship in this sense is the ground of all reality. People do not exist except in their relationships. In her spirituality, we honor all connections, to woman, to the earth, to place, to region. Connection is also a political act. Connection is understood politically as the idea of solidarity. It is not just a being together or a coming together. Solidarity is a deep political commitment to preserving and protecting one another, and the deeper life force that binds us all to the earth. Reciprocity, solidarity is a caring and a seeing that I only exist as connection. What happens to you happens to me. What happens to the earth happens to us all. She writes, let us all return. It is people who give birth to us, to all cultures, who by their labors create all material and spiritual values. Look at the woman next to you. How are you connected to one another? What commitments do you have to one another? What responsibilities to nurture, to love, for example? Meridel's spirituality also speaks to us about the idea of emergence, the potential in the seed, in people, in the political world for growth and life, for change, and for transformation. The inner space, the power within, is not passive, but moving always to creation, to emergence, to birth. Birth is a central symbol woven through all her writings. In ancient female mythology, birth is connected to the act of weaving, to integrating, to bringing together. Birth is also the great mystery, the fullness, the container, the idea of plenty, the harvest which integrates our work, our survival, our connection to the earth. This sense of fullness, of containing all, the container, the womb, the basket, the bowl, all these imagery is omnipresent in Meridel's work. And she writes, how good you can feel the jar of the woman, the Indian holding basket and jar, its great rotundity. If anyone ever finds out what value the empty earth, clay, dust, clod, this is woman. When it is known socially what power this is, what power of vacuum and attraction, to pull in, to mother, to draw in, focus and draw, now I contain all this. It seems possible to me that perhaps all people at some time feel this, round and full. Emergence is also the passion, the desire to create, to bring to material life, to make real. If I have anything in me, she writes, it is yearning. It is the edge of emerging. It is the full, unbroken wave, concealing its break, but carrying it in. The seed given over to flesh. Emergence is also connected to change, to transformation. Again, her words. How can it be explained? Suddenly, many movements are going on within me. Many things are happening. There is an almost unbearable sense of sprouting, of bursting encasement, of moving kernels, expanding flesh. Perhaps it is such an activity that makes a field come alive with millions of sprouting shoots of corn or wheat. Perhaps it is something like that that makes a new world. Emergence is not only birth, but birth into relationships. She writes, emergence is a very simple thing. Everyone emerges from someone else. A child emerges from you like a butterfly from a cocoon. That's what birth is. The Hopi Indians have tremendous butterfly dances and symbology of the emergence, and they call it emergence. Everything coming out of everything else in their rituals. Enormous harmony when you see it all. When the pod opens, Beethoven opens. When the pod splits and bursts and releases, the body opens, the milk pod, it cracks along the clench, the curve, the vagina, the clove. And you can hear the sound of burst, burst. You can hear the sound of emergence. Finally, emergence is also a result, a coming to completion, to closure, to full realization of potential. Just as the butterfly emerges to the full potential from the chrysalis, so too is emergence a celebration of an ending that is a beginning. Ripeness, wrote Shakespeare in King Lear, is all. And Meridel writes, all I ever wanted to do is ripen. The meaning of woman is also central to Meridel's spirituality. I am a woman come to speak for you, she says. I am a woman speaking for us all. This is a song for strength and power. Woman is symbol and actualizer for both the forces of emergence and connection. Socially, personally, and politically, the forces of spiritual transformation center on women reclaiming the female experience, celebrating the validity of her own image, her own power, creating spirituality out of her own experience, joining in praxis, in action with other women, what we call sisterhood. According to Meridel, women can really express the circular consciousness of connection and emergence because they're on the round, not on the linear. Getting into the global world means there's no longer the linear world. No time, no progress. You can only progress along a straight line. Our ecological problems are a result of being on a straight line, she writes. We imagine we'll never return because a straight line doesn't return. But if you're on a circle, what you do here returns here, and the ship falls on you. If you think circularly, she writes, you could never pollute the earth because you would know it would return something that is foul. I call this the feminine consciousness. This consciousness is the key to spiritual transformation and change, and it is the special insight, awareness of women. And our spiritual task is to celebrate emergence, change, and transformation. Images of birth are central to most religious perspectives. According to Canadian philosopher Mary O'Brien, most male religions have puberty rites, which she calls rites of second birth. They are designed to replace the fertility power of women celebrated in the early goddess religions. Most of these male rites excluded women. The idea of the second coming is one of these. These puberty rites often take the form of mock pregnancy. But Meridel reclaims for us this essential ritual of birth, emergence, and transformation that is the key to female spirituality. And she has grounded it in the social and ethical world. The symbols of birth and the circular consciousness also reflect the idea of continuity. Patriarchal spirituality had to create in its false birth rituals an alternative to the woman-centered goddess fertility rites. As we reclaim those ancient symbols and their power of representing the life force, we further ground spirituality in the material world, in the real world of women's bodies, of the earth, connecting us to nature, to one another. The empowerment of women is critical to round out the contours of this radical spirituality. For Meridel, struggle is central to transformation. Whatever stands in the way of emergence, of growth to maturity, to ripeness and richness, must be resisted, must be struggled against. For women to grow, they must become aware of the oppression in their lives. Together, With one another, the wound can be transcended. Here is the power of political and spiritual transformation. Meridel wrote to me in a letter years ago about this spiritual collective power of women. Hundreds of women create the immense consciousness of woman, of earth. Every person is a composite of the archetype, obstructed or darkened, and being lightened by the cosmic circular around her, being changed by it. There is a magnetic field in which we are all living. We owe allegiance to the purity and force of this body. The accumulation of this force appears in all and sometimes resonates in all bodies, becomes a huge concept, a germinal knowing, able to continue and pass down to the seed progenitors. It was a long time before this was possible. You did not know your grandmothers, did not know how to pass down the spiral of the genes. Now this rhythm, resonance, knowledge, vision is becoming visible, known, appearing. So we all appear together, and our strength becomes us all. The crop, the highest cob, the seed of the highest consciousness. We are in this period now. This is what is happening. Now we see each other in each other also. Mirrors, mirroring, shining. There is no individual in this communal jet. Certain times the entire century gathers into harvest and leaps into form. The male religions of the world have always sought to silence and repress the voice of women. Our first politically transformative act must be to speak out. We must, like Meridel did, take on the role of the prophet, the role of the annunciator. In the Western tradition, the role of the prophet was to warn the people, to change their ways, to warn them about governments and kings. This is the power of speaking out. It is a political act, speaking is. Like the prophet, women too must learn to speak truth to power. It was through the medium of writing that Meridel spoke most eloquently. This was the purpose of her writing, she recalled in a rare autobiographical piece. You wrote in the socialist world more like a prophet, a conduit for the suffering of your people, a cry out, a whoop or a holler, more like the ballads of the people come to sing sorrow, a common sorrow. I also took this from the Hebraic prophets who were educators, singers, warners, and opened the bundles of grief. I look upon writing as revealment, underground, subversive exposition, exposing the enemy. Knowing the enemy is the second politically transformative act. Some people call it consciousness raising. Some call it deconstruction, whatever the label. It is a coming into awareness of the forces that oppress us. All her life, Meridel has named the enemy. The male world of power, exploitation, progress, hierarchy. The life-destroying economic order of capitalism. The rapacity of the multinational corporation that is destroying the earth. Writing about the explorer LaSalle, she names the male way of looking at the world. You see a madman with a curious gun sight through a small hole of ownership. He has looked at this vast space. He has reduced it to his pocket. Like many marriages in contract only in the dark. The landscape silent, down your gun sight at last. Not a red man, not a black man, not a bird, not a dove, not an antelope, not a buffalo. Nothing moved. At last, you had it empty. Only the skull, your own, grinning into the ledger. Writing about capitalism during the McCarthy era, Meridel said, "Our people in America are in deep anguish. They are in the dark of capitalism. The assassin passes through your hands daily as the product you make passes into the chaos of a market you never know. The people suffer under capitalism in a different way than a colonial people. For the masks are cunning, and the naked wars of aggression are hidden under the words of democracy. And you are delivered into the death of wars against people you do not hate, and made guilty by Nagasaki's and Hiroshima you did not plan. Finally, let me close by outlining 4 aspects of female consciousness that sort of bring together all of these ideas of what I call Meridel Lesueur's radical spirituality. First of all, the survival of life. Women have a long tradition articulating demands for social and economic change in defense of the survival of their families and their towns and their cities. Before class consciousness is life consciousness, survival consciousness. It was women who led the food riots in the 16th and 17th centuries, demanding a fair price for grain. It is women who continue to support union struggles for a decent wage, and now even for the very jobs in their communities. Meridel honors this life, and especially this struggle for life. The reverence for life lies at the root of spirituality, and it also lies at the heart of politics. She writes, I don't dissociate politics from being able to eat or live or love. I hate that thing that politics is something special. Politics is the way you associate with power, the relationship to power, and how you feel about power. I never made any divisions like that. The struggle to live and to get food and not to be crushed or run over by the power structure, that's politics to me. Keep your children alive and all other children alive and at least somewhat free not to be smashed in their hearts and minds. Secondly, the life consciousness is also earth consciousness in our radical spirituality. Earth consciousness helps us to see the connectedness of all things. Earth, woman, politics, home. Meridel writes, the earth is not feeble or submitting to rape. The mother is also fierce devourer and defender. Did you expect to do whatever you wanted with no response from the female? She is fierce. The plunderers of nightingales and violets are brought to trial. An important part of earth consciousness is regional consciousness. Central to grounding our own spirituality is connection to the intimate place where we live. It is the earth that is the source of all life, all energy. Writing about corn, for example, Meridel struggles to teach us how we must change our way of looking at the source of spiritual power. The corn emerges from the earth, drawn up, he writes, leaf from root. Everything is drawn up. If you had this sense, instead of that devilish Christian sense that all is from above, given to you by some patriarchal God. Earth consciousness is also about participation and celebration, celebrating our own special place. The earth is our home and the source of all spiritual energy. What would the spirituality of the Minnesota River Valley be? How would we create symbols to celebrate the acres of corn and soybeans, the groves of oak and ash, the mighty cottonwood? Connection to the earth. For Meridel, spirituality exists in the world, the social as well as the natural world. It is not abstract or distant or otherworldly. Only when we know the self, thirdly, are we truly empowered. Our love for ourselves, nurturing the source of life and of power. For Meridel, the self comes to fullest expression and realization in its connection with others. A social self that is both the highest expression of the individual self and the highest expression of the circle. And fourthly, at the base of Meridel's spirituality is the power of active, not passive connection with others, with the common good. The words Don Ket means solidarity in Vietnamese. And in a poem of the same name, Meridel sent to support the Vietnamese women during that terrible war, we hear the power of our struggle to connect with one another. She writes, "How can we touch each other, my sisters? How can we hear each other across the criminal space? Sisters, the predator plans to live within our bodies. They plan to wring out of us unpaid labor, wrench their wealth from our bodies. Like the earth, they intend to bore inside the woman host, open the artery like weasels, use, consume, devour, drill for oil, eat the flesh of the earth mother. Like the earth, they will consume all woman flesh and the commodities of her being. We are the wine cask struck to the ground, spilled. We are a great granary of seeds, smashed and burned. We are a garroted flight of doves, meadows of dead and ruined women. There is no slight death. After the first death, there is no other. The body trashed dies. There is no abstract death or death at a distance. Our bodies extend into the body of all. Every moment is significant in our solidarity. I felt the boots on your throat as on my own. I saw the guns pointed at us all. It was the gun used on my sisters. Around the powerful themes of sisterhood and collective political action, Meridel has forged her spirituality. A grounded spirituality, grounded in action, in community. This is also the meaning of revolution. It is also the meaning of spiritual transformation. According to Meridel, we must create, quote, a global consciousness, a global world, a new world. Not of global imperialism, but human collectivism. Not cultural imperialism, but global consciousness of new human relationships. Not isolation and fear, but global solidarity. Not the antithesis, but the synthesis. Not the power that disintegrates, kills, but power of the people. A power that relates energy to everything, generates, and does not consume. The ego, the I, will turn into the global we. Throughout all time, the purpose of religion and spiritual expression has been to energize and transform the collective spirit. Meridel calls us to a new radical spirituality, to real ritual, created out of the experiences and struggles of our lives, to love for the earth, to love for one another. We must be born again into a new world. And so I leave you with these questions. What icons would you raise to yourself and to your struggle? What list of values would you live by? How are you connected to other women, to children, to men, and to the earth? What are you doing about your beliefs? What vision of the world are you creating, acting on? What are you transforming, changing? Speak to me. Speak to one another. And as you speak, your words will join the words of other women, and they will become a song. This is a song, as Meridel tells us, for strength and power. Thank you. tribute. Can you hear me? My tribute to Meridel Lesueur is entitled with one of her lines, "Power without the use of wires." I first learned of Meridel Lesueur and her work in the 1970s when a poet friend of mine, Elizabeth Weber, went to Butte, Montana to hear Meridel read. At the time, Elizabeth, Coco, I called her, and I were two of three women studying poetry writing with Richard Russo at the University of Montana. Needless to say, we women were outnumbered. The subtle message given was that men had more creative powers, that men were the creative teachers. This despite the fact that a woman poet taught there, Madeline Freed. To hear of Meridel, poet, writer, activist, mother, grandmother, a woman with a past, a woman still writing and rising to be heard. This was the woman and writer we needed to know. At the time, I was coming to recognize a deadly split within myself, the creative versus the sexual. In my desire to be like the men who surrounded me, I began to move away from my body, my truest self, the temple of my spirit. Gradually, my passion soured into anger. I was told I could not write about my feelings, except in relation to a world men could understand. If I did attempt a poem from within my female, womanly self, it was often met with blankness and often silence. So when Coco returned from Butte to say, Meridel Lesueur is writing still, and she is full of womanly power to share with us, I was ready. Her line in Doan Ket assured me of my place and value as a woman in a world where intellect was wielded like a knife. It was the bumblebee and the butterfly who survived, not the dinosaur. What does it mean to sing among the flowers, to part the air slowly with a hum, to emerge from the cocoon? The male tradition tells us we are, and have always been, the divine inspirer whose sexual powers were assigned only to ignite the male creative soul. We have been called the muse, named and appropriated in order that men might produce poems. I am here to tell you such a muse is passive. She is like a whore slaving for the literary canon. Well, Meridel shows us how to emerge from that cocoon. She teaches us history and powers of corn, connecting us with the ancient corn mother, reminding us to share our creative powers with one another as women, teaching us the energy of interdependence. This power is in us. We are the place. What emerges is our motherland. It is to these emergent and interlocking islands that all women writers come to be nourished and to be reborn. The green corn, the seed corn, rebellion. Meridel continues to show us it is by going to the source in ourselves and in other women that we learn the mother tongue. We
are in the midst of a great rebellion of seeding. Lucy Irigaray, in her essay, When Our Lips Speak Together, reminds us to speak in our own words, to create our language. For, here I quote, if we continue to speak this sameness, if we speak to each other as men have spoken for centuries, as they taught us to speak, we will fail each other. In her magnificent poem, Origins of Corn, Meridel says, recount your all moves to murder and move to grace, redemption of the act of growing. The holy wafer of conception, we enter each other in the wilderness of no surveyed country, where nothing is owed, nothing is lost, nothing is spent. I dedicate my poem, Commonwealth, to Meridel Lesueur. A woman as old as the century draws me a map of her body, the undulating hills and wet folds blossoming beside the red river, where skylarks inscribe passionate arcs against the raven line of progress. Set free, the heart's bright poppy, packed tight as a firecracker, swells into cloudburst over dim Minnesota, where a woman with children by 8 different men remembers the tenderness, the ancient curve of mothers and fathers whose blood embraces without asking whether we belong. In this century of money, the all-night cafe is a church along the American highway, where we love without apology the secret in each other's darkness. This land, this longing, cannot be stolen, nor pried loose and sold like missing silver dollars along the bar. Long after we have forgotten the hometown and death, it collects the body's memory of dreaming song and meets us at the grave. Meridel's gift to us is the giving to ourselves and each other the never-ending power of dynamic exchange. For it is through connecting with the work of other women that we awaken ourselves to inhabit the world of words, those body sounds, that original mother land. Alexander Bilge's prose poem on women artists says, reading another woman's work, looking at her art, spirit, and breath, passion, it's what I live for, the beautiful alive, the reality that passes between us, something that makes me live, a kind of nurturing. The elements lie inert in me, ready to burn on contact. A lava. Meridel Lesueur awakened in me and other women the power of our seed. As Grilka says, her work moves into mine and so suggests to me mine is available to me somewhere in me. For me and for many other women, Meridel Lesueur embodies these powers available to us. The raw green girl of her early work began to spin and to transform the old myths which separated woman needs from mother and mother from earth. By her living and working presence, we began to reform the community of woman, mother, earth. When I first began writing in an institution of men for a male teacher, I was using but half of my powers. Insofar as I denied the physical root of my creative power, denied that my sex and imagination were one vital tree of energy, I was feeding a potential suicidal self, the living body of my muse. What saved me was coming to know, through reading Meridel's work, following the story of her life, that I embody all of her, capital H, her, mother. We all do. We are collectively a muse unto ourselves, a strong and vital community of we. And to remember her, the goddess within, to put her body back together, limb by limb, Meridel teaches us about the secret power of generation. In journal, Meridel wrote, "The transmission is in fields like light, is instantaneous and lights up great areas at the same time, responsive as a tuning fork to electric vibrations at a certain pitch. Tune in and repeat, power without the use of wires." In 1984, Meridel Lesueur was awarded the prestigious Wonder Woman Award. Rightly so. In her acceptance speech, she said, "I am your great-grandmother, your grandmother, your mother, and I will never end as long as you are activists." In an interview with Nancy Jo Hoy for Iowa Woman magazine, Meridel asked, "What about women getting over their inferiority? I've been waiting for a woman to come up and bring me a manuscript and say, 'This is wonderful.'" Never. They always creep up and say, "Well, I don't think I should give you this. It's no good anyway." And Hoy said, "Is it a sense of inferiority or are they intimidated?" Meridel said, "It isn't me. It's a whole attitude toward their creative life. They don't think they're any good." Hoy, "Yes, a lot of women feel that way." Lesueur, "I feel that way. I never sit down to write, that I don't have to say I'm good, that I'm as good as so-and-so, or as good as a man. Even now, it's so deep, it's a terrible thing." Hoy, "You say you have those feelings too? But what about the girl? With her strength of character, she was like a beacon." Lesueur, "All because of the other women. Only because of the other women. The whole ending is the strength of the communal." I'll read you a little bit from the girl. "It's crowning," Amelia cried. "I never had heard that. The crown of its head. It's all right, just turn the head. Now easy and strong, girl. Oh, girl, it's coming. Easy now. I felt all the river broke in me and poured and gave and opened. Was it my cry, the cry of the woman, the cry of a child?" Belle was shouting, "It's a girl!" And the women murmured happily, "It's a girl." You keep the cord, and then when the child is lost and wandering, they come back to our grandmothers to find their road. The cord will tell them the road, the road. I will close by reading you a poem I wrote in honor of Meridel Lesueur and what she continues to teach us about our connection with Earth. And as I read, Maria Gervais, an independent choreographer and dancer in Minneapolis, will embody the words. The Tao of Woman, for Meridel Lesueur. A bold woman is the beginning of holiness. Her wholeness resides in the earth. The bold woman births all that comes into being. Ever bold, she can see the earth. Ever burdened, she can see what is whole. These two twins come from the same mother, whose darkness enlightens us, regarding the mystery which is woman, and the gate to all mystery which is woman. Womb and tomb complement each other. Daughter and crone contrast each other. Queen and witch rest upon each other. Blood and flowing harmonize each other. Female and male follow one another. Therefore, the wise woman exalts in doing nothing, in speaking of nothing, and the 10,000 things breathe with her, planting, yet not claiming power. New life is grown, then let go. Not lifting up the goddess prevents division. Not lifting up the god prevents division. They are one and all. Not hoarding gems prevents disease. Not coveting what is beautiful prevents privilege. The wise woman rules by filling her heart and her belly, by growing her bones instead of ambition. If women lack cunning and hunger, the fierce will not try to control them. All is done well. Nothing shall be. Woman is an empty vessel. She is filled, but never full. She empties, but remains filled. O womanly source of 10,000 things, sharpen the roundness, brave what is loose, emerge from the dust. O ever-present hidden womb, from whence do you come? You are the mother of all. Woman and man are ruthless. They see the 10,000 things as individual. God and goddess are ruthless. They see the people as individuals. The space between woman and man breathes. Together, they become the center of shape-shifter. The form remains. The Earth Mother never dies. She exalts in the spirits of trees. Her body is the gateway to above and below. It is like a tunnel, barely visible, between two worlds. It always takes you home. Woman and man go on forever. Why do they not die out? They are born of one another, so never die. The wise woman always waits until last, so she is never left behind. She is alone, and so all one. She is at one minute. Through her care for us, we are not lonely. Better cut the cord than let the baby die. Overuse the knife and gain too much. Store up your powers and you'll have no protection. Plain worldly status and the spiral collapses. Dance when the work is done. This is the way of woman. The wisest woman is like water. Like water, she burns 10,000 things and does not push. Water flows even into dead spaces, and so is like woman and her power. In living, stay close to woman. In prayer, sink within the blood of your heart. In your relationships with others, nurture and protect. In your words, imagine the world. In your laws, be natural. In daily affairs follow the thread with the breeze. In taking action, go with the moon. Carrying female and male, and preferring but one, can you avoid a war? Paying attention and gaining flexibility, can you be like a new baby? Dirtying and redeeming the original knowledge, can you achieve purity? Loving all people and pronouncing law, can you escape the ropes of control? Understanding and opening to all things, are you able to give birth? Bringing forth out of darkness, out of the cell, yet not claiming ownership. Laboring, yet honoring the miracle of life. Guiding, yet not controlling. This is the art of motherhood.
Well, how do you follow all that? I wanted to be last, and now I think, oh, I should have been first. A year and a half ago when we were Meridel, well, you know I'm Meridel's daughter, right? When someone calls Meridel, I answer the phone. You got to get by me. So when we were called about Meridel her being the keynoter at this conference, it was a year and a half ago, and Meridel said, I might be dead in a year and a half. I don't know how it'll be. What will be happening in a year and a half? I mean, it sounded like, how can you plan that? And then if they were depending on you, how could you come through? So the compromise was, well, my attitude was, well, if you die, be okay because you could still go. Problem if it didn't feel good. So the compromise was this panel, and then she can do whatever she wants to do. And she almost isn't here because a couple of weeks ago she broke her knee. So Monday she wasn't going to be here, but some miracle happened since Monday, and we're here. But it's an honor for me to be included and to participate in this panel. When the idea came that I would be one of the ones on the panel, I said, no, I can't do that. I can't talk about my mother, Meridel. Well, I can talk about her to family and friends, and I've had many discussions with people about her work, with people I didn't really know. But when 2 FBI agents came to my home in 1954, they wanted to talk to me about my mother. And I said, no, I don't talk to strangers about my mother. So that was hanging there, and Neala urged me to do it. She said, you can say things that no one else will say. And well, that's a good chance. So I thought about all the various images that are out there about Meridel, Images of her as the Earth Mother, the Earth Grandmother, the oracle, the powerful, independent woman, the role model, which is a term she definitely dislikes. And I've always, all my life, heard other people describe Meridel to me, and I've always known that my descriptions, my images, and my knowledge was the correct one. Somebody said I should be funny because no one else is going to be funny, and I said, can you hear me? Now, today, when she's 92 years of age, and I'm nearly 65, I am even more positive that I know the real Meridel. You see, I empty her pockets. I keep close track of everything that goes into her and leaves her body. I have stared fascinated at her echocardiogram and her 92-year-old heart beating. I was entranced by the idea of a muscle and a machine that keeps on going round the clock. And through all these years, my mother's heart. But of course, the other part of this is, we didn't need the echocardiogram to know that it was beating. That's really serious, you know. I mean, we get so, this is the technology, the grand technology, but she knew it was beating. We all knew it. But it was really, if you ever get to see one, and if it's somebody you know, it is fascinating. I've been there when she's brought home by loving friends, full of tales of how wonderful and strong and stimulating, what a bright shining light, full of wonderful words, ideas, stories she is. How I've enjoyed being with her so much, and how much energy she has. I help her into bed, give her her pills, her tea, her water, fix her feet, try to make her comfortable, and I might watch her sleep for 3 or 4 days. So my image of her energy is very different. When I have tried to protect her from it, it almost always backfires. So I guess she's just got to do it. When I have shared how it is with friends who are trying to take care of their mothers, we find many more similarities than differences. When I was a child, I thought my family was different. My mother was a writer, my uncle was an artist, my grandmother and grandfather were politicians, my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother had all been divorced. There were long discussions at home on the issues of the day. There were newspapers from all over, magazines, newsletters, books everywhere. If you asked a question, someone would hand you a book to read. It still does. On the question of divorce, that really seemed to make us different. But as I grew older, I found that divorce wasn't different at all. It seems that staying married or getting married now is different. My grandmother, Marion, Meridel's mother, was passionate about democracy. The right of the people to vote, which we so take for granted, to decide on all the issues facing the society, to decide what kind of society they wanted. She said that democracy could only work if everyone participated, and she struggled very hard toward achieving full participation. She knew that education was key, and she edited and published newspapers, pamphlets, made speeches, all for the purpose of letting the people decide. When we think of the fact that all of us, except those descended from slaves and the indigenous people of the Americas, this Turtle Island, are descended from escapees from European armies or wars, from the Pacific Rim to the British Isles, you can see how all of us, are descended from struggling foremothers and forefathers. We're all refugees from someplace, which I think would be really good to remember today in view of, you can't even list them all, but I'll say Haiti. Many more than that. So from this consciousness, and out of this brilliant scholar of Latin and Greek, this beautiful woman, Marian, comes Meridel. Born soon after the death of an infant older brother, Meridel appears. Her mother determined that she will survive, and the hopes of the ages deposited in this new and perfect baby. Her mother would say she was always a dreamer, with a vision she didn't understand. Meridel listened to her mother, her father, her grandmother, the people in the streets, those who came to the house, listening for who they really were, what was really happening to them. She grew up loving the land, always writing about the richness of the earth, the curve of the horizon, the living creatures sustained by the earth, its waters, its flying, swimming, running, crawling creatures, and the human creatures. She became a storyteller, resisting the silence of so many women of her time, bearing their pain, their experience, their knowledge, and burying it within themselves. She wanted to tell it, share it, bear it. I also think she wanted to tell the others, so that the common stories, the lives of the people, and what they held in common with each other would be known. At this time in our lives, I have become acutely aware of how it is to age, to ripen, as she says. In her book, Winter Prairie Woman, written after she was 90, I think she does such a wonderful thing about memory, where this alone and dying woman remembers her life as if it is in the present, which of course it is. She still sees her mother and her father. She sees them, and the children, and the birth, the harvest, the cooking and the baking, everything. She sees them now and moves in and out of all the parts of her life in an instant. How long ago, when it was, what time it is, it's just not important. When you don't have to go to work or have dinner ready or do the chores anymore. Whatever she sees and knows is her life, and it is now. And I hope whenever I visit a nursing home, which I think we should all do, I hope I never say, oh, that was a long time ago. Because I know when you come near the end of your life, it's all now. All of it. In her newest book, The Dread Road, she tells a story and connects the events of the present inside a bus to the history of the land they are riding through. And then around the world, where the same things are happening right now. Some of us see the small things around us, the details of life, the eye color, the clothes, the decorations, the color of corn, the little details. And others see the big pictures, the global cosmic relationships. They tell us stories that are conglomerates of lives. The tale they tell might be about 6 people all in one. The pictures they paint are vivid and truthful, just as truthful as the detailed stories, which are also true. But the details in the big one might not be quite right. But it's all true anyway. Meridel's vision is of the communal, collective reality of the earth, but not just the earth. Also the sun and the moon, the solar system, and yes, the universe, and all the diverse relationships included in the dynamic entity which we call life. Thank you, and I'm passing this to Meridel.
proud to think it was. Driving the boat. My grandmother said, how do you live? There was no markets for women's rights. The women's magazine, you had to write copy the lives of women that were accepted as traditional. There was no way to make money as a writer. There was not even advertising. In 1910, I can't imagine what a barren thing it was. But this today is refreshing. It shows, I hope it shows for all of you that life is communicable. And there's always going to be said. And it's communicable on such very levels of knowing. Rachel knows things and a certain looks at life in a different way than I do. And now I'm able to accept it. And I think it's my way of looking at life. I think we wrote the Red Roman together with this use of each other's knowing. And this is not only your daughter, but also a communication between women. You don't realize how barren that was. My grandmother never seen anything about her life. She's straight up and down, and it's close and so tight. And I asked her about sex. She said, just keep standing. Held away from reality. This was my grandmother was a great, beautiful woman who was just held away from all of the fires and all of the life that was around her. I can't express what this means to me, that you all you young people, you're like in a big silo of ritual. Corn. I mean, every one of these pieces of corn is a life, is a complete life, is a complete thing. I have to tell you something about Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn is science. And it made a mistake of letting her look at corn. For 40 years, she looked at corn as a woman and as a woman. They wouldn't pay any attention to it. He says there's something in corn that moves, that runs, that leaps, that is alive, that is a great atom of some kind. It leaps all over the corn. You know, from the top, the bottom, God is never really there. The corn is solid, like everything is just a solid male slate. And for 40 years, he kept telling me about corn. And he died last week at 90. And when 10 years ago, he got the Nobel Prize for looking at corn. Male scientists don't want to really look too alive or anything. So this means to me that all of you and all the women that I've loved and the women that I've seen grow, and I've seen that it's possible to communicate, that it's possible to communicate to thousands of people and now millions of people. That women are beginning to rise all over the earth, and bringing in new consciousness. And the feminine consciousness you even have in the destruction of the earth today. In embryonic knowing, you wouldn't have the disaster and the death of millions of people. They're trying to destroy the feminine, the female knowing. I don't mean that as just a woman. I mean the female knowing, the female knowledge of being in. As Neala expressed the whole thing of being within and not without. Our society is going crazy because we went outside. So we can kill anything. You go into any nation, everything is outside of you. It's a siege. I was going to read part of my poem. I was happy to hear my poem more. I tried to make the note that come on, I said, nobody would look at or into your being, or into your consciousness, or what you wrote about it. What you wrote about was your tale. Science. So this Neala and Mrs. Russell it's just, I don't know, I hope it means the same to you that you communicate, it moves. There's something in that there's something in us, in a human, and now we're in such disaster and such a terrible feeling of loss, of the world going to hell. Don't you feel it? It's not true. You're on your bed, you carry it, and there wasn't much to tell you about anything else. And now here, I see all the humans in the sadness, all the courage, and all you have to believe that you're the source of life, and you are created. It's true, the modesty of I'm still frightened by the male people. I was on television 3 years ago when I came about it, and we were two of the great poets, so Brad and Law, and I used to sit in the middle. And we needed this talking over. And they were answering questions. You know what? I was 7 years old. I got smaller and smaller. And play. Right in front of them. I was so angry. I told my Bobby, I'll never mention the thing. She never understands first. I think I kept my promise. I was amazed at 70 years old. I could be little and feel such minuteness of how very and guilty these two monstrous egos. It shows them the monsters of communicating, the great female knowing, the great embryo, the great power for the female. I don't mean in the sense of just being a woman. Men are dying because of the lack of female power. And men don't have a female information and power. And they die. And this me, I can't, that's one of the things to look at me is to see all this, to build up the power of me. And see the thought, you're not going to fall into that great night. You're going to say things like this with Timber that was never seen the movement in form. Never seen the coin of dancing outside. They've never seen the coin of just speculating in coin. And it's a wonderful thing that he kept going. So I'll read a little bit of what I was doing. I think this says, rejoice, find fire alive in our hands. I think that makes sense from the thought today. Fire alive in seek of the women, in the acceptance of the women, life is the truth. How do we how can we hear each other on the criminal stage? How can we hear each other? How can we hear each other? Into the egg, into the bloody drums, reach something. I always hear the song of healing, the great legends of our resistance, the strong and delicate strength. Our mutual church lights the sulfur emanations of centuries of exploitation. Amidst the ruins, we shine forth in holy mutual triumph, revealing the plainest cruelty and human depravation, the depredations of power, the strength of numbers, and endurance, and bodies lost from their lost community. The only knowledge now is the knowledge of the dispossessed. Our earth itself screams like a bandaged growing giant, uprise in all the moon, and bear upon a conqueror. Lock your doors in the cities. There are no quiet beds and no sad feet. Everything you touch now is ticking towards explosion. Scabs of Ottoman wreck. The ruined world is dynamite. Callous teeth and dead gorillas gnaw the air. Nature returns all humans as warriors. The earth plans resistance and cries, live. What strikes you, my sister, strikes us all. The learning earth is resonant. Conception is instant solidarity of the child. Spontaneity of the root guides the green sap to follow. Invention, dispossessed, is a holy crime. We keep our tenderness alive and the nourishment of the earth breathes. The heart is central in law. We burn in each other. We burn and burn in choruses of millions. We appear armed as mothers, grandmothers, sisters, warriors. We burn. Sisters, critical to live, tend to live within our bodies. Wrench their will from us. Like the earth they intend to grow inside the moon host. Open the arteries of these breezes, use, consume, devour, drill for oil, eat the flesh of the earth's mother. They will consume all living flesh and the qualities of their being. The harmony of the world will be from the sale of their bodies. The great shops will multiply stolen wealth. They favor the cheap labor of women around the world. We are the wine cask, structured ground. We are great greenery, the sea, smash, and things. We are the character flags of slaves. We are face out of bone. Years later, bends bone and bed. As the root of contrast, our bodies receive the insult. You see the thousand globes, sets of ovum and child. Meadows of dead and ruined women. There is no flight there. After the first death, there is no other. Body trank, die. There is no abstract death or death and existence. Our bodies extend into the body of all. Every moment is significant in our solidarity. Women of the earth bear the weight of the oppressor. Bearing us down into deep, go upward from the dark. From the womb, from the abyss of blood, from the explored stream, from below we blood and lies sink. I saw the women of the earth rising on the horizons of nitrogen. I saw the women of the earth coming toward each other with praise and heat, without reservations of space, all shining and alive in solidarity, transforming the moon into bread and children, in a new abundance and glorious summer. calling, crying out in song, we arise in that place. We will run to the living things without cease. We will reckon with all confidence. We will collect golden light. We will light singing across all seas. Resonant in the song of women, rich and green, alive, in solidarity of communal love. Uncovering the illumined fruits, flying flowers, and vines burning trees. We bring to you our fire. We pledge to you our guerrilla fight against the predatories of our country. We come with thunder, lightning on our skin, roaring wind singing. Our sisters sing, choruses of millions.
Very much, Meridel. It's been a most awesome treat to have you speak with us. As we begin now to take our break, a long-awaited break, let's take with us the spirit and the thoughts and the inner dancing of our horns, and let that lead us to where we need to go next in our life with the many choices of workshops.
Cold air coming.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary. Good, how are you?